Today is the 26th of September 2008, and I'm in the office of Amherst Turner, and we're doing the taping for the Veterans History Project. Amherst is, well, you know, I don't want to pretend that we don't know each other, you know, and I got to admit that you and I go back a long way. You were on my board of directors and so on. So if I call you by Nub or anything else,
that's
you
fine.
don't, you know,
I go by both. Sure.
Okay, all right. You were in the Army, but before you went in the Army, you were a native Ann Arborite.
It's true.
Went through the schools here.
Born and raised here. Went to the University of Michigan. After the old Pioneer High at the Frieze building, we were the last graduating class out of that and the first graduating class in the new Pioneer High School, right across the street, basically, here. And then went to the University of Michigan.
What were your courses in at the University of Michigan?
I was an English major.
Oh, that's good.
And I also got a teacher certificate. And I also was an ROTC. All of which took another semester, but it was well worth it.
An extra semester?
An extra semester of school. And then I went to the military after graduating that fall semester in the spring of 1961.
Where did you go? Where did you do your so-called basic?
Fort Benning.
Fort Benning. Was it much of a basic training, or was it?
Yes, they have a regular officers. They have a regular school, so to speak, that they put you through, and it's pretty well done. You know, just not a lot of time to play. You're mostly working around the clock, or out in the field, or learning one thing or another. They also have a summer camp in ROTC, which is out of Fort Riley, Kansas. That's prior to graduating and becoming an officer. So there's basically two schools you go through. I remember the summer camp well because I was the only cadet out of 257 or whatever it was that got all bullseyes with the old 22, I think it was a Browning rifle. I think they carried it in World War I or something.
Yeah.
But they were using it in the 50s in the Army, and so I found out I was a pretty good shot. I'd hardly ever fired a rifle before that.
You never had?
No, I wasn't a hunter, and so I never really had any experience.
You know, it's not about me, but when I went into service, we had 4 weeks of orientation, and there were only 3 days in the field.
It's more than that now.
I know. There was, you know, demonstrations, and one day they let us shoot guns. Next day they shot at us.
Yeah, exactly. Well, no, they do a pretty good job, I think, nowadays. I think the Army prepares, especially in ROTC, to be an officer in the United States Army immediately upon graduation from college is probably the best training a young man could have, you know, between the ages of 22 and 24, whatever the case may be. You know, you learn real quick how the job is done, and you have people working for you that are twice your age, and you have to earn their respect, or you're not going to get anywhere with them. And so it's a real learning process that you don't even have in business.
Real challenge, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's by far more challenging than business.
Is it?
Yes.
Is it? Huh. Why? Because the people in business are your own age? Or?
Well, you're throwing, I mean, unless you're somebody's son and you become the CEO of the company at 22, which isn't too likely.
No.
But in the Army, I mean, you don't work your way up. You start right out as an officer, and even in a rifle platoon in Korea, Um, you know, you have a platoon that you're responsible for, and you have exercises where you know, you're responsible for tactical maneuvers and so on. And then from that I moved up to S2, which actually was a captain's slot. I was a second lieutenant, obviously, at the time, but it was a supply and maintenance platoon officer for the whole battle group. You know, so again,
How big a group was that now?
oh boy.
I mean, roughly, what are we talking about?
Well, our battle group had 4 or 5 companies, and I'm trying to remember now, plus you know, it's run by a full colonel. So the battle groups today, I'm not quite sure what they would relate to, but hundreds, obviously, and hundreds of personnel.
Mm-hmm. And you were in charge of supplies for all that?
Right.
Were you? How long before you got shipped over to Korea?
Right away, right after I went through the school at Fort Benning. And then you get your orders wherever you're going to go. I mean, and so I went directly to Korea.
How many months were you in before? How many months did it take to go through Benning?
Well, that I want to say a month course, and then I went back and finished up, you know, at Michigan, and then it seemed, yeah, I'm pretty sure then I graduated, and you get your bars, you know, and you become an officer, and then the next orders I got were to go directly to Korea, and I was there for 13 months.
Were you married at the time?
No, certainly wasn't. It'd be a lot tougher if you were married to leave for 13 months.
Of course, it depends on where your assignment was.
Oh, right. If you're going down to Benning or something,
Yeah.
it'd be a piece of cake, right?
Yeah.
Most of the guys I was in with were single.
Were they?
Yeah, most of the young guys.
So you were in charge of supplies for the whole battle group.
Right.
Now that was on the DMZ?
Well, we were up near the DMZ, Munchani. There's the Imjin River goes through there, and there's a place that looks like a dragon head. And it's 20, 30 miles below DMZ. And its basic tactical approach was to keep, if anybody invaded from the north and crossed over the DMZ, they'd have to get across the Imjin River. So our battle group was responsible for that position, and of course to keep that from happening if it ever did.
Were there any threats for that happening while you were there?
No, you know, the war was over, the Korean War was over, and the closest thing to problems you had were occasionally you'd have line crossers, spies in effect.
Oh.
They would try to sneak across the DMZ, they'd had American money and false passports and so on. And basically espionage type activities from the north, but very little problems otherwise.
You said that you know, you were a 20-something-year-old second lieutenant, and you had sergeants and so on that were probably twice your age.
Right.
Yeah. How difficult was that to establish yourself, if you will?
Well, it is difficult, you know, and of course some of the same things in the military would apply to business as well.
Mm-hmm.
But the big thing is you have to earn their respect. You have to show them that you know what you're talking about, you know what you're doing, that you can do the job, and you're willing to get up there and give it 100%. And whether you're in the field or just in your barracks, I mean, and I think the same things apply. They respect, I mean, right off the bat, you're a second lieutenant that knows nothing. But once you can prove that you know a few things, and that you can lead people on a few things, especially when you go out to the field. We had one big field problem, which was like a test, where you're evaluated by higher officers in the battle group. And it's an actual field problem where you're moving your platoon, you know, across areas, placing fields of fire, the typical things you would do in a mock war. And that, if you do well in a test like that, I think that's how I was moved up to the S2 position, or the S4, I guess is what's called back then, which was the supply and maintenance platoon.
So I take it you did well in those fields?
Yeah, I think I did, yeah, I was told I did. And the big advantage of that was I got to have my own Jeep,
Oh, wow.
which we put a custom paint job on.
Uh-huh.
And I heard about that.
You mean you weren't allowed to?
No, it wasn't quite OD, it was more British racing green.
Uh-huh.
But oddly enough, they let me keep it, so.
Were you into cars the way, the way you are now?
Yeah, I
back then?
always was a car nut, and always loved cars, and so exactly. Yeah, it was natural to customize the Jeep a little bit.
Did you do any racing before you went into service?
No, not really. I mean, rallies and things, but not any real racing.
Uh-huh. But you have since?
Yes, after the service I did. And then, of course, my son was heavily into racing during the last, for about 10 years, from when I retired, 98 to 2002 maybe.
You said he was heavy into racing?
Right, he raced all over Europe, raced at Le Mans. In fact, the Viper right here with the yellow stripes,
Yeah?
that was the Viper he raced at Le Mans, 24-hour Le Mans. Then he ended up racing in the British GT Championship. He drove one of the two cars for the Porsche team in the UK, and the two-car team came in first and second.
Oh.
And then Porsche pulled out of racing, and I think he decided to get a real life and move on. Got a couple of MBAs, and now, of course, he's working here. In fact, you just saw him when he came.
Oh, yeah? Uh-huh. Now, this being GT, or is this?
Well,
Eaton
no,
or
this is Amherst Fund LLC is a venture capital fund, equity investment, et cetera, that we set up after we sold GT in '98.
Okay. Now, I know the chronology here, but we were talking about when that factory there was Intro, and before that it was King.
King Sealy Thermos Corporation, and Intro purchased the automotive division of King Sealy Thermos Corporation in '68. And then we bought the Ann Arbor plant, which is the rendering, the picture you see on the wall there, in '82. And we started GT Products and sold it in '98 to Eaton Corporation.
Now, obviously you were out of service then.
Right. I was in the reserves till, and I went to a couple of reserve meetings up north, and I didn't get out till in the early '70s. And of course I lost my arm in an accident in Switzerland with a train prior to that. So but apparently the Army didn't know that. They never said anything. And I was told that I was a captain, and now I was, officially out of the reserves and through. So I often wonder what would happen if they called me up as a one-armed captain.
My wife says, if they call me up, I'll be the oldest first lieutenant in the Army.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
78-year-old.
Well, exactly.
Louis.
You might get a battlefield increase along the way or something.
Yeah. But you got out of service, out of active service after a couple of years.
Right. Went down to Benning after Korea. Went down to Homestead Air Force Base in Florida on the Cuban invasion.
Oh, yeah?
Preliminaries. I was the property book officer for everything at Homestead for the paratroopers who were going to jump into Cuba. And so we did that for several months.
Were you preparing them?
Right.
You were.
We had all the equipment was coming in and setting it up for the, staging area for them.
And it never took place.
It never took place, right. President was down there.
Oh, yeah?
JFK came by in his convertible one day. I mean, unbeknownst, they don't. It's not like where the president's coming to town. If you see him, you see him. If you don't, you don't. I was standing right there on walking somewhere right there on base to one of the corners, and I saluted him as he went by. I think I was about the only one there at the time.
Was this after the invasion was called off that he went down?
No, this was before.
Before.
This was where they were still in the planning stages.
So the atmosphere at that time in Florida and that base was.
Well, everything was top secret. I couldn't even tell anybody where I was.
Mm-hmm.
They flew me down from Benning, and you couldn't even tell people where you were going. Couldn't bring your car. You pretty much came as you were, and I stayed there for several months, as I recall.
But I would imagine that with the impending, supposedly impending,
it was pretty
invasion,
hectic.
Yeah,
it was pretty hectic.
Yeah.
And of course, you're setting up communications and everything all over with all kind of people, from all areas coming in as well. So,
how did those paratroopers? How did those guys feel when it was called off?
Well, they never came in. See, we were a staging area we were setting up, and then of course the thing after the missile problem that everybody knows about. After that, everything was called off. So the paratroopers never flew in to stage and then leave the next day for Cuba or whatever time they would have spent there. So we had tents and beds and everything set up for them for the night before.
What about your unit? How did it? The people who were setting up the tents and the supply and everything, were they relieved when it was called off?
Well, I have no idea. They were sent back to their bases, I would say. I think everybody went back to where they came from. I flew home with several of the captain I worked for at the time and several of the people that were in my area.
A lot of the people who were older than you and I, who were ready to go and invade Japan, were quite relieved with the A-bomb, because they were sure that was going to be the end of their lives.
Well, it certainly saved a lot of people's lives, I would assume.
Sure did, yeah. It's easy now to make some judgments about that, but it wasn't so easy then.
At the time, right?
Yeah. So you got out of service. You went back to. You didn't go to Chrysler right away.
No, I didn't. I actually worked for like about a year for General Foods in the Detroit area. Then I went to General Motors Detroit Diesel Allison Division, later to become Penske Diesel, and I worked for them for a couple of years. And then someone from King Sealy came over and talked to my boss and asked if he could interview me for a sales job at King Sealy Thermoscorp. And that was '66, and so I worked only a couple of years there, and Chrysler came in and of course bought out our division.
And then when Chrysler wanted to get out, you and other people got together to buy the.
Right. When they actually set what they called a green book around, it showed everybody's assets and everything, and we knew that our plant in Ann Arbor, which at that time made only diesel governors for General Motors of all things, certainly wasn't something that Chrysler needed to keep.
Oh yeah.
So we made an offer, but it took a year and a half to get the whole thing.
Even though it was owned by Chrysler, it was making
GM governors for the Detroit Diesel.
Yeah.
Right.
So when you all bought it out, after the year after you made the original offer, were you still making those?
Right. When we bought the plant, the only thing they made were diesel governors, and we knew that business was just going to become a service business within 10 years. Maybe have a 10-year death knell and finally die because electric governors would come in and so on. And so basically you'd be selling service parts. So we came up in 1985. I say we, Rudy Bergema, our chief engineer, who was a former chief engineer at King Sealy and Chrysler, came up with a design for a rollover valve, the thing that goes into your fuel tank. When your car rolls over, it keeps gas from coming out. And Ford was having the ambulance problems at those times where the medvac ambulances were burning. They, a spark, and it was because the rollover valve was capping off the pressure, cork it, and it would cork and built up, of course, pressure, and then one spark and a little gas, and the thing would light. And so we came up with basically the design that fixed that problem for him. And that, which Rudy had a patent on, we got a patent on, and we started in '85 making rollover valves, which later became onboard fuel vapor recovery systems, and even made some sending units, anything that screwed into the top of the gas tank. And between '85, by the time we sold the division to Eaton in '98, we were close to 100 million in sales.
Oh, wow.
From a clean sheet of paper.
Fantastic.
So it was a relatively successful venture for a smokestack industry.
Yeah.
Rust Belt industry in Ann Arbor. One of the last, I should point out.
Is that right?
One of the last smokestack industries in Ann Arbor. There's not much left.
How did they allow you to stay that long?
Well, I think your grandfathered in.
Yeah.
They're a city. Now there's the buildings made into condominiums, as you probably know.
Yeah.
And they did quite a nice job of it.
Yeah, I'd love to go through there and see those.
Really quite nice.
Now GT still exists.
Well, not actually anymore. The name, and you still may see some signs out in the fence or something.
Yeah.
No parking signs or whatever for football games. But basically, GT, has been spread out. The original stockholders kept this. We kept this building here, and we sold the building behind us back to the University of Michigan, which is now their police group, their safety police group. So we still have this building, which we call GTH, for the three original members. Of course, my original partner, Bob Gustine, is now deceased, so it's his wife and family, and Jay Hartford, my other partner, who's in the office next door here, and myself.
So you were still manufacturing next door?
Well, we actually never did. We bought it to manufacture in, and we were able to basically cram enough things in our downtown building that we never really had to use that space. So we sold it back to the University of Michigan.
So you came in and said, this is a pretty good operation, $100 million a year.
Well, basically.
Bought it up.
Basically. Right.
And they don't continue to manufacture these things?
They moved a lot of the business to Mexico.
Oh, my.
And even some of the business to Monaco, where my son Matt actually worked for Eaton in Monaco after we sold the business. And so there's still remnants of the product out there, but it's all made somewhere else now. I think Eaton still has an engineering group in Ann Arbor of some of the former GT employees.
You're not in manufacturing now.
No, I've been retired since '98.
Yeah. What are you doing now to keep yourself busy?
Well, it's the old story. You don't realize how busy you are until you get retired. But I'm in Florida for 6 months in the winter.
Yeah.
And I'm up here in Ann Arbor for 6 months in the summer. And I still come to the office, at least in time for lunch with the guys or to read the Wall Street Journal. But basically, Matt runs the Amherst Fund, so I don't have really much to do. So I'm basically retired.
What's the Amherst Fund?
Amherst Fund LLC is our venture capital fund.
Oh, I see. You supply capital for people
Right.
who
Right.
have a good idea?
Exactly.
Hopefully it'll pay off.
Well, if you hit 1 out of 10, you're lucky.
Is that right?
Yeah, it's a very high risk
Oh, is it?
area. Sure.
Oh, I didn't think it'd be that, you know.
No, it's,
You want to answer that?
no, I think something
okay.
kind of outside.
Oh, I didn't think it'd be that risky.
Yeah, it's definitely high risk.
Yeah. Well, tell me, you mentioned your son a couple of times. Now, when did you get married? You weren't married while you were in the service.
No, I was married in '69.
So you were out of the service
right.
for
and
quite a number of
working for King Sealy still.
in '69.
Oh, wait a minute. It became Chrysler in '68. So I was just, Chrysler just bought out the King Sealy plant.
No?
Yes.
Gordon is on the phone?
I'll have to call him back. Thank you, Susanna. Sorry, I should have told him that we were doing this.
It's okay. You got married in '69.
Right.
Right. Do you want me to have?
Yeah, I'll have to call him. I'll call him back. I'm sorry.
She a local girl?
Jan
Was she a local?
was from Midland and came down to go to school here. Went through nursing school. And she had just graduated herself and was working for Park Davis, later to become Pfizer, Warner Lambert, then Pfizer, here in Ann Arbor. And I met her by chance when I went over to see another friend who wasn't in the apartment, and Jan was her new roommate.
Mm-hmm.
So I met her here, and that was a few years, '69, so some time ago.
That'll be 40 years next
Right.
year.
Looking at 40.
Yeah. How many kids do you have? It looks like you have.
Matthew and Laura. Matt is 36, and he's president CEO of Amherst Fund. And Laura is in her last semester at Harvard Business School.
Wow.
And just had a little grandson, our first grandson,
Uh-huh.
who's about a year old, Luke. And
Where are they living?
out in, right near Harvard.
Oh, is that
In
right?
Cambridge. They just bought a house in Cambridge. Her husband started his own company where they're into green building,
So that's going to give you an opportunity to go into New England then, isn't it?
Well, it sure has. We visited her a couple times already. I had to go out and help her move in, and cut the hedge and fix the garden gate, and all the things that grandfather does.
Yes. I'd like, I don't know what else to ask that will give us any insight into your military life or your personal life. I know that, if we go way back, your father had a grocery store, didn't he, in town?
Yes, he did.
Yeah, and
Right over here, in fact, right across from Ferry Field, the old Ferry Field on Dewey Street.
yeah. Now, did you have any brothers or sisters?
I had a sister,
Uh-huh.
and she's still in town, Sandra, married to Gordon Bocher, who's sort of Ann Arbor's Mr. Tennis. He's been coached and working in tennis tournaments, and he still works with the kids in Ann Arbor. There was an article in the paper that they called him Mr. Tennis. So,
Yes,
so
yes.
he's still a big tennis player and fan, excellent player, and very still supportive of the sport.
What do you play? I see you got golf.
Well, I had the meniscus go out in the knee a while back, so I stopped jogging, stopped playing tennis, and basically switched to golf.
Oh, uh-huh.
And I still work out regularly, and
Do you?
you're right, try to keep up some strength. But I don't know, at 70, you start to notice it.
Yeah, yes, you do. Believe me, yeah. And that at 78, you even notice it more.
I'll bet.
You don't do any more racing, you said.
No, we Matt and I still do some club racing. When you take your car. Well, like the Mercedes Club, for instance, had the racetrack over at Waterford a couple summers ago, and in effect, some of these trophies as a result of that. Matt and I went over, and in the drag race, he beat me by 100th of a second because he went later and the track was a little cleaner.
Oh, you didn't do it the same time? Same time?
No, you just run time. It's a time trial thing.
Oh.
We both shared the same car,
Oh,
so it was fun. But that's all. We're pretty much taking it easy.
yeah. Now, as I say, I'm not sure I have anything more to add or ask you about, but I would like to kind of go around your room and take some pictures of. Okay, that's the picture of the old King Sealy.
That's a rendering of the original King Sealy plant, built in 1939.
Uh-huh.
Of course, the pictures of the race cars are Matt racing in Europe.
Yeah.
This is my daughter Laura, co-captain of the Dartmouth ski team in her last race at Dartmouth.
Her last race?
Yeah, her last ski race at Dartmouth.
Uh-huh.
And Matt, for that matter, was on the Michigan ski team,
Oh, wow.
captain as well. So there was racing in the Mackinac race. I'm waving there at the back of the boat.
Uh-huh.
That's Tom sitting on the side, over on the port side there, and some of his vice presidents came with him on that race, as I recall.
Where is he?
He'd be right over here sitting on the side.
Is that you waving in the back?
Yes, it is.
There you go. That's quite a boat. Was worth a few million then, or?
No. I sold it was worth 5,000 or something.
Was that right?
Yeah.
Jeez. Oh, that's something.
Just coach, you know.
All of those models up top. Were those models of things that you owned?
Some and some were just a friend of mine actually. Started that collection and he died and his wife wanted to dispose of some of the cars.
Right, where is he now?
That's Matt at 14 jumping off cliffs out at Steamboat Springs.
Hmm. And was he, well, he obviously wasn't with the university team at that time.
No, he was just probably junior high.
I just want to say thank you, and good luck in your retirement. And
Well, thank you, and I just want to say for any young man out there that may be watching this, if you have a chance and you want to spend a couple of years very fruitfully after college, get into ROTC and go into the Army. You'll enjoy the experience.
good enough. Thanks, Nub.